Good morning, everybody. My name is Chayla Metzger, and I'm so happy to be with you this first Sunday of May. Our theme this month is stories, and for me, stories are intimately linked to memory, and therefore, stories are linked to identity for me. Inevitably, somebody will ask, what is your earliest memory? It's such a human question, and it can result in some very interesting stories. But where might our earliest memories come from? By the time we begin to speak, we are already full of stories others have told us about ourselves. For many of us, our earliest memory story may be based on something we've been told. Our story of our earliest memory could even be a story based on a photograph that we've been shown of our pre-verbal self, a photo that has been shown to us accompanied by a story we've heard many times. We may claim this photo-based story as our own, but is it? It can be hard to know which of the stories we tell of early memories are truly our own. Before we were able to speak in full sentences and to tell our own stories, our private memories may be more like dreams during sleep. Dreams are so real, but when we wake up, they can be notoriously hard to say out loud as a typical story. Somehow, my very earliest memory is of feeding ducks. When I tell my story, however, of my early childhood, I am more likely to share a different memory, a very scary one, of sitting alone at dusk, watching a black and white TV and seeing the helicopters of the Vietnam War on that TV and somehow being transfixed with the knowledge that there was damage in front of me, damage and the sound of those whirling blades. I could not look away. The sky outside that room was darkening. The blades on that TV were whirling. I have told that story over and over again as I now approach 60. It felt seminal, but as I examine my memory story, I think there are missing parts. I was at a babysitter's house. Were my parents at the hospital because my brother was being born? Were they on vacation without me? Was I just feeling scared and alone in that empty room? There may be more to that story. I can tell others that early memory story, and it kind of makes me as a sensitive anti-war child of liberal parents. And I know I have told it that way repeatedly, but that is insufficient. There are many memories to unpack as stories, but I select some to share more than others. This selectivity in stories is what has built my current identity, and that identity starts with the story of my earliest memory. But it's shaky. Perhaps we can agree that identity is a story in progress. It's not ended yet. Questioning what I think I know about myself must extend to questioning what I think I know about other people, and finally, questioning the story that I tell myself about the world. Come, let us worship together.
We said goodbye to Reverend Ernie yesterday. We celebrated his life in a service. We have said goodbye to many people in the past year. We will continue to say goodbye to people and to welcome new life into our world. And so I light the chalice this morning in the name of life and death. I light the chalice as we remember that both life and death are part of what we get being on this planet. That if you have life, you are guaranteed to have death. And that as we learn to embrace the death and the loss, we also learn to remember and to hold on to the lessons learned and to the meaning that the lives that have passed our path have given to us. And so I light this chalice, remembering life, remembering death, remembering it is a cycle, remembering it's all we know, and it is a mystery.
Tu la clisio na la pasekaya, tu la clisio na la pasekaya, kaya na la pasekaya, kaya na la pasekaya, tu la clisio na la pasekaya, tu la clisio na la pasekaya, kaya na la pasekaya, kaya na la pasekaya,
tu la clisio na la pasekaya, tu la clisio na la pasekaya, kaya na la pasekaya, kaya na la pasekaya,
tu la clisio na la pasekaya, tu la clisio na la pasekaya, kaya na la pasekaya, kaya na la pasekaya.
Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Community Church of Santa Monica. I'm Shayla Metzger, your worship associate. I, the Reverend Kikanza Nuri-Robins, and our entire team of worship associates are delighted to be joining you in our online sanctuary this morning. If you are new to our community, please know that while our building is closed, we are still here. And there are many, many ways to learn more about us and to become involved. We offer a multitude of programs that serve the needs of our congregation and to be of service to the larger world. We offer broad religious and personal education for youth, as well as for people of all ages, in addition to serving as a pillar of community activism in our Santa Monica and West LA neighborhoods. If you're interested in learning more, please join us for our virtual visitor meetup after this service. Unitarian Universalism is not defined by creed or dogma, but is guided by principles that affirm the worth and dignity of every person and encourage an individual search for truth and meaning. We honor the wonders of existence, and we believe we are all connected to each other and to the independent web of life. Our beliefs are drawn from Scripture, from science, from nature, philosophy, personal experience, and ancient traditions. We are an open, affirming, and welcoming congregation. We are diverse in backgrounds, we are diverse in our social locations, gender identities, ethnicities, sexual orientations, spiritualities, and philosophies of life. We are united in our desire to create a diverse, beloved community, to live the principles of our faith, and to serve the wider world. As we begin this morning, we want to acknowledge that our church buildings and the homes of most of our members are on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded lands of the Tongva people who live here and have cared for this land for thousands of years. This land was stolen from the Tongva people by colonial settlers. We recognize and mourn the often deadly harm inflicted on the indigenous peoples of this country. We lift up their grace, their resilience, and their relationship with these sacred lands. Please join us after the service for our virtual coffee hour on Zoom. We've got a number of breakout room options and different discussion topics, conversations, just opportunities to get to know each other more deeply. Links will be posted below, as well as in our UUSM Facebook group. We are really looking forward to sharing a bit of time together after the service, even if it's virtual. We have so many interesting and amazing activities going on at church. The Reverend Kikanza Nuri-Robins is offering leadership training through Zoom on various dates for the next few weeks. Our Dining for Dollars important fundraising events, which are not only fun but help us a lot in our church, are happening again, and bidding for various dining events will be going on May 16th through May 23rd. We are looking for folks to host Zoom-friendly events wherever you are, and of course we're looking for folks to bid high on those events. And finally, save the date. Our church will once again gather at our beloved UU camp at Beneville Pines up in the mountains, September 17, 18, and 19 this coming fall. Stay tuned for details and ways to get involved. For more information about these activities and all our other church events, please visit our website at uusm.org. Look at our online newsletter at news.uusm.org, and you may want to sign up for our weekly newsletter and find out more on a regular basis. Thanks.
El amor es la enseñanza de esta iglesia.
Love is the doctrine of this church.
Buscar la verdad es su sacramento y el servicio es la oración.
The quest for truth is its sacrament and service is its prayer.
Vivir juntos en paz.
To dwell together in peace.
Buscar el conocimiento en la libertad.
To seek knowledge in freedom.
Servir a la humanidad en comunión.
To serve humankind in fellowship.
Así es como convenimos unos a otros.
Thus do we covenant with each other.
From all that dwell below the skies, let songs of hope and faith arise. Let peace, goodwill on earth be sung through every land by every tongue.
Good morning. This month, not just this morning, but this month, we're going to be talking about stories. Specifically, we're going to write a story together. But in order to do that, we need to know how stories work. So for this week, we're going to talk about the parts of a story. So, there are really three basic parts of a story: the beginning, the middle, and the end. But lots of different things happen at those different times in stories. So we're going to specifically focus on the beginning. So in the beginning of stories, you have to introduce your audience to a few things. People. Who is the story about? Is it about a troll named Milford? Is it about a warrior princess? Is it about a line cook in Cincinnati? You gotta know who your story is about. Well, you've also gotta know where your story takes place. Does Milford the Troll live in a fantasy land of wonder, or does he live in Central Park? Does your line cook in Cincinnati live in Cincinnati, or do they need to drive from a suburb of Cincinnati? Does your line cook story take place in their restaurant? Does it take place in the suburb? Does it take place on their vacation? You also got to know, well, when is really important. Does the story take place far into the future? Way, way in the past? Does it take place in a parallel realm that runs on a time that's right next to ours? You gotta know things. So, I have homework for you. Anybody who sees this, anybody, whether you are a teeny tiny tot who can't quite read yet but has lots of brilliant ideas, or you're a very adulty adult who hasn't written a story since high school, you've got homework. You can email me, and I encourage you to email me, characters. It could be simple as a cat. It could be as complex as Milford the Troll's Uncle Gregory, who is king of the trolls. Just send me characters. Send me places. The place could be under the kitchen table. The place could be in the middle of the Bermuda Triangle. The place could be at a campground in Yosemite. But send me people and places. And send me times. 1962, or 15 minutes before the lunch bell rings, or the year 3000. Not much has changed, but they live underwater. If you get that reference, also email me. Send me all those bits, and I, at random, will pull some. And next Sunday, I'll give you the beginning of a story. We'll talk about what comes next in a story. You'll send me more ideas, and so on and so forth. And by the end of this month, we all together will have written a story. So remember, email me, people, places, and times. I'll see you next Sunday.
May your life be as a song, resounding with the dawn, to sing awake the light, and softly serenade the stars, ever dancing circles in the night. May your life be as a song, resounding with the dawn, to sing awake the light, and softly serenade the stars, ever dancing circles
to sing awake the light,
ever
softly serenade the stars, ever dancing circles in the night.
I invite you to sit in silence, in community, and to be mindful of your joys and sorrows, to be mindful of the joys and sorrows that we share as community, to be mindful of the leaders of this church, the leaders of our nation, the leaders in the world, to be mindful of all who need our prayers, who need our thoughts, who need our appreciation, who need our gratitude, who need our teaching. Let us be mindful of the paths that we walk. Let us be mindful of those who cross our paths. Let us be mindful that we are not here alone. Let us be mindful that we are here to fulfill a purpose. In a small town somewhere in Eastern Europe lived a nice man with a little problem. He talked too much about other people. He just couldn't help himself. Whenever he heard a story about someone he knew, and sometimes about people he didn't know, he just had to tell a story about them. Since he was in business, he knew many people, and he told many stories. When he told his stories, he embellished them with little details to make them funnier. He loved the attention he got and was delighted when people laughed. Other than his stories, which were not always kind, he was a pleasant, good-hearted man. He kind of knew his stories were wrong, sort of, but most of what he told had really happened, hadn't it? Most of his stories were entertaining, weren't they? One day, he learned something about another business person in town. Of course, he felt compelled to embellish the story and to share it with his colleagues, who told it to their friends, who told it to people they knew, who told it to their partners, who spoke with their friends and their neighbors. It went all around town till the business person heard it. She ran to the rabbi and reported that she was ruined. Nobody could do business with her after this. Her good name and reputation were gone with the wind. So the rabbi invited the man who loved to tell stories to come for a visit. When the nice man with the nasty problem heard how devastated his colleague was, he truly felt sorry. He honestly thought it was such a big deal to tell the story because it was true, mostly. The rabbi could check it out if he wanted. The rabbi sighed. True, not true. What really makes no difference. You just cannot tell stories about people. It's like murder. You kill a person's reputation. Now, the man who started the rumor felt really sorry. What can I do to make amends? He asked. The rabbi looked at him. Do you have any feather pillows in your house? Rabbi, I'm not poor. I have a lot of feather pillows. What do you want me to do? Sell them? No, just bring me one. The man was mystified, but he returned a bit later to the rabbi's house with a nice fluffy pillow under his arm. They stood in the yard, and the rabbi handed him a knife. Cut it open. Really, Rabbi? It will make a mess. Just do it. The man cut the pillow, and a cloud of feathers floated all over the yard, and the soft breeze scattered the rest of the feathers around the town. After watching the feathers float away, the rabbi brushed them off his jacket, gave them to the man. Here, he said, now bring me back the rest of the feathers and stuff them back into your pillow. The man stared at the rabbi in disbelief. That's impossible, Rabbi. You know I can't do that. Yes, said the rabbi gravely. That is how it is. Once a rumor, a gossipy story, a secret leaves your mouth, it flies on the wings of the wind. You can never get it back. I wore my bracelets today. I haven't had them on for almost a year. I took them off when we began to shelter in, and recently, as we have started to move out into the community, I realized how much I missed wearing them and decided even if I'm in the house, I'm going to wear them. There's a story behind these bracelets. I didn't just buy them at Etsy. These were given to me. These bracelets were worn by my grandmothers and my aunts, and they took them off their arms and gave them to me. They had bracelets all the way up to their elbows. What's special about them is that they come from the West Indies, which is where my people come from, and each bracelet reflects a particular island, and the old women can tell you which island the bracelet came from, and also can tell you how old the bracelet is, because the symbols on the bracelet, on the ends of the bracelet, the symbols are unique to each particular island, and the symbols have changed over the years. And so from one generation to another, there are different symbols. And so this bracelet reflects my heritage, my ancestry, my family. Our stories or narratives are complex, intertwined, and constantly evolving. Stories affirm our interdependent web of existence. The stories of our people, the stories of our families, our personal narratives, the stories we tell about ourselves are all important and all reflect who we are and how we are with one another. Now, some people say, well, I have no story. Of course you do. There's the story of your name, or the story that your name has no story, the story of how you lost or you never found your voice so you can't tell your story. Everyone has a story, and if you don't tell your story, the people around you tell their stories about you. Your growth and development as a human being is reflected in the stories you tell and the way your story changes over the years and from one audience to the next. Your story reflects how you engage in the world and how you interpret your world. Families tell stories. They tell birth stories and baby stories and death stories, stories that tell the history and the values, stories that reflect shame in the family, pride in the family, stories that are inspirations, stories that are warnings. In my family, there are stories about how my brother tried to kill me. My older brother is 15 months older than I am, and before I was 2, he gave me mercurochrome to drink. Then when I was a little bit older, he branded me with a hot knife. And then when I was a little older, he took me to the park and sold me cheaply. These same stories about how my brother tried to get rid of his little sister, these same stories about a little sister's love for and trust of her big brother and her resilience. These are also stories about why a mother was so nervous with her children and why she was no longer a sound sleeper. Stories are combinations of facts and perceptions and feelings and opinions. Stories help us to discern the truth, because fact alone is not necessarily truth. Remember the story of the 6 blind men and the elephant? One touched his trunk, another touched his tail, one touched his leg, another touched his side, one touched his tusk, another touched his ear. Each person had a very different and accurate description of what an elephant looks like. Each had a single story which they thought was truth until they talked together and shared their stories. In our communities, our personal narratives are woven together to become the story of that community. Your personal narratives tell a lot. You tell on yourself with your stories, what you think of yourself, what you think of others. We tell stories to make ourselves look better, to reinforce our own stories. A man I worked with some time ago always told stories about his colleagues. He talked about everyone he worked with and had a negative story about every single person. He told these stories to me like he was telling a secret. You're special, so I'll tell you. One day I finally told him that his stories made me wonder what he said about me. Nothing negative, ever. I didn't believe him. Do you ever wonder what stories people tell about you? Are they complimentary? Are they believable? How do they compare to the stories that you tell about you? My friend Sherry asked her friends to each share 3 stories for her birthday. She said, tell me a story about me, tell me a story about my character, and tell me a story about our friendship. It was a tough request for many of us, but we tried our best. But it reflected that Sherry understood how important stories were, important for our growth, important for our understanding of who we are and how we are in the world. A few weeks ago, I introduced you to my cousin Celeste in a sermon. She was surprised that I called her the nice one in the family, and she told our other cousins and her siblings what I had said. They all said to her, well, Kikanza's right. And then they told Celeste more stories about how nice Celeste is. See, stories shape our perception of ourselves and others. Another friend of mine was married to a man who was loud and obnoxious and a bully. None of her friends liked him until she told us stories of his kindness and his generosity to her and to people that we didn't know. Stories are the glue that hold relationships together. Relationships are intertwined stories. The story of your love, the story of how you met, the story of your courtship, the story of how you learned to fight. Those are all stories that bind and bond you to one another and bind your relationship. Stories hold communities and societies together. Folk tales and fairy tales are metaphors of a culture. We can find representations of Goldilocks, Red Riding Hood, The Little Mermaid, 7 Dwarfs. We find them in books, in cartoons, in movies, in memes, even in pornography. We find these things because they are so much a part of our culture, and each character represents something that we remember and has meaning for us. The person who tells the story, how the story is told, can shift the focus and either reinforce or change the point of the story. It can be a story of shame and blame. It can be a story of pride, a story of embarrassment, a story comparing one person to another. The internet. The internet is the source of many stories, and lots of lies and rumors and innuendo are spread on the internet. There are websites devoted to school bullying, to cancel culture, to naked exes, to political enemies, and to fact-checking the stories that we read on the internet. The telling of stories also helps us heal. So it can take us down and slander us. It can also lift us up and heal us. Justice and reconciliation work include stories. There are the historical narratives where you say, this is what happened to me. This is what happened to my people. And then there are the stories that memorialize the events. And these are stories that say, let us not forget that this happened. We will not forget. We will tell the story. And then there are stories that become institutional apologies. So someone representing the system or the structure that was the symbol of the oppression or the source of the oppression says, I'm sorry that happened. I'm sorry that we asked you not to tell your story. And then the story is told about the apology. The creation of narratives that include the intersectionalities of our stories is also part of reconciliation and justice, because it wasn't just me who was in the story, you were in the story too. And so you say, we were there too, my people were there too. We own a part of that story. Telling the stories together helps us understand relationships, helps us understand the other person's perspective, helps us to see the world through a different lens. Telling our stories is important because it's important to avoid a single story about anyone or anything. We are more than our labels. Anti-bias work is the process of identifying the stories that shape our perceptions and judgments, examining these stories, listening to the stories and experiences of others, and then deconstructing the bias, deconstructing racial bias, deconstructing gender bias, deconstructing ableist bias. It's the process of deleting narratives and adding new narratives to our stories about others. There is a TED Talk that you can find on the internet. It's called The Danger of a Single Story. The Danger of a Single Story. It is told by a Nigerian author whose name is Chimamanda Adichie. Chimamanda Adichie. The Danger of a Single Story. I invite you, I encourage you to find it and listen to it. She's a great storyteller. Some of the best storytellers in our society are not novelists, they're comedians. Think Richard Pryor, Robin Williams, Jerry Seinfeld, Jeff Foxworthy, Kevin Hart. They're all great storytellers. They make us laugh, and it's usually the laughter of recognition, and they make us laugh while they teach us about family, about community, about children, about relationships. In any community, if you listen, you will learn what the people value. Who are the stars? What are the stories that people tell about them? Here at this church, at UUSM, there are lots of stories that are told about Reverend Ernie, his wedding ministry in particular, how many people he married, the kind of people that he married, when he married them, what other people said in the community about all the marriages that he was doing. And I never hear a story about Reverend Ernie when I don't hear a story about Maggie, his wife and partner in life and in ministry. Sometimes the stories we tell are more powerful and influential than the truth. At a church where I served, there were stories about how the church had once flourished. Over 200 children in Sunday school every week, they said. Really? Where'd they meet? I asked them. Well, they met upstairs. Upstairs was a room, not part of the whole building. There was just one little room upstairs that could hold maybe 30 people. The sanctuary, it was a small church. The sanctuary could barely hold 200 people. But several of the folks who had been there talked about how many kids were in Sunday school. 200 kids. Yes, absolutely 200. It was an aging and a dying congregation. The people held on to these stories, the stories about their past, because however mythological these stories were, these stories helped them to face their future. Stories lifted them up. Stories lift us up. They help us to grow. They help us to get to know one another. Stories help to build relationships. One of the things that I have learned recently is this relationship conversation, which is a great tool for introverts and really easy in the Zoom world. I make an appointment for a 15-minute conversation. I work up to 30 minutes, but that's it. Just 15 minutes, 30 minutes. My invitation is, will you have a cup of coffee with me? No agenda. I'm not here to ask you anything. I'm not here to tell you anything in particular. Just have a cup of coffee with me. I'd like to get to know you better. And so in that 15 minutes, there's time for one story. And so I'll say, tell me about. I've wondered about your bracelets. Tell me about your bracelets. I wondered about your name. I wondered about. Tell me about. Let's just talk. And oftentimes they ask me questions as well. And Many times the 15-minute conversation will become a 30-minute conversation. It's always better to leave wanting more. And so at the end of that conversation, the person will say, well, can we do this again? Can we talk again? And it's always easier the second time. And so one conversation at a time, like brick by brick, plank by plank, building a relationship. Asking people to tell their stories lifts them up, and it will lift you up with them because they are so grateful and flattered. Stories can also take you down. They can frighten you. They serve as warnings. There's stories about the devil and hell and the boogeyman and monsters under the bed and ghost stories and apocalyptic stories. There's stories that warn us that if we're not good, we will become like the people in the stories. Myths and spiritual stories function to weave a narrative that's shared by a people. Every spiritual tradition tells stories about how their people are special. You are the chosen people. You are the ones who have the light. You are the ones who have the knowledge. You are the people that God spoke to. These are stories that reinforce the doctrine and the principles and the values. There's a Jewish tradition called Midrash, and a Midrash is a story about a story. It's told by the rabbi to help explain the stories and the laws that are in the Torah, the sacred writings of the Jews. The story that I read to you about the rabbi and the feathers is Midrash. It is a story that's told to underscore the story that says what is against the law of God, in terms of talking about other people. Myths and spiritual stories shape our culture, not just Jewish culture. They shape all culture. Think about Dan Brown's novel, Da Vinci Code. Think about the movies that we can watch every single year. A Christmas Carol, A Wonderful Life, The Ten Commandments. They all reinforce Judeo-Christian myths and traditions. And even if you aren't a Christian, you may know stories about Mary and Joseph, about Moses and the Red Sea, about Noah and the Ark, about Adam and Eve. Joseph Campbell wrote The Power of Myth. And he said that now a myth is a story. Usually the word myth is used to describe other people's stories, our stories, your myths, our sacred writings, your myths. A myth basically serves 4 functions. The first is the mystical function, realizing what a wonder the universe is and what a wonder you are. This is what Joseph Campbell says. The second is cosmological. Myths show you what shape the universe is in. Myths connect us to science. They connect us, the mystery of the world and all that's in it, to science and order and the things that we can understand. It's cosmological. The third function of a myth is sociological, supporting and validating a certain social order. Every religion gives us a spiritual message and cultural messages, ways that people are supposed to behave in this society. And then the fourth function of myth is the one that everyone must try to relate to, according to Joseph Campbell, and that is the myth tells us how to live a human life under any circumstance. The best way to learn about other people, other organizations, other communities is to listen to their stories. The best way to make and nurture connections is one story at a time. Tell your stories, my friends, and listen to the stories of others.
We are a community that works for more than ourselves. Today we pledge 50% of our offerings this month to Clergy and Laity United for Economic Justice, or CLU. CLU brings together clergy and lay leaders of all faiths, with workers, immigrants, and low-income families in the cause of a just economy that works for all and protects those that are most vulnerable. Our second UU principle is justice, equity, and compassion in human relations, and the work of CLU is committed to that UU principle. Half of our offering this morning will go to UUSM, so please give generously. We also encourage you to give to the general fund for our church. We are not worshiping in our building, nor can any of the rooms on our campus be used by the many groups that have met there for years. So if you are able, and we know some of you are not, please give. There are 3 ways to give: over a text, through our website, or by mailing a check. Using your smartphone, text 844-982-0209 with a donation amount and the code for where the funds will be posted. A brief registration form will be sent to you if this is your first time giving by text, but it's very simple each time after that. To make a generous congregation contribution, use code GCC, or you can scan the QR code that you see on your screen. On our website, you can make a one-time donation, or you can set up recurring payments for your pledge or for any other purpose. You can also find our address for sending a check. Your giving makes a big difference. Thank you so much.
Dum 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 dum.
I am sitting here wanting memories to teach me to see the beauty in the world through my own eyes. Yes, I am sitting here wanting memories to teach me to see the beauty in the world through my own eyes. You used to rock me in the cradle of your arms. You said you'd hold me till the pains of life were gone. You said you'd comfort me in times like these, and now I need you, and now I need you, and you are gone. So I am sitting here wanting memories to teach me to see the beauty in the world through my own eyes. Since you've gone and left me, there's been so little beauty, but I know I saw it clearly through your eyes. Now the world outside is such a cold and bitter place. Here inside I have few things that will console. And when I try to hear your voice above the storms of life, then I remember that I was told. Yes, I am sitting here wanting memories to teach me to see the beauty in the world through my own eyes. Yes, I am sitting here wanting memories to teach me to see the beauty in the world through my own eyes. I think all the things that made me feel so wonderful when I was young. I think all the things that made me laugh, made me dance, made me sing. I think all the things that made me grow into a being full of pride. Think on these things, for they are truth. And I am sitting here wanting memories to teach me to see the beauty in the world through my own eyes. I thought that you were gone, but now I know you're with me. You are the voice that whispers all I need to hear. I know a please, a thank you, and a smile will take me far. I know that I am you and you are me and we are one. I know that who I am is numbered in each grain of sand. I know that I've been blessed again and over again and again. Yes, I am sitting here wanting memories to teach me to see the beauty in the world through my own eyes. Yes, I am sitting here wanting memories to teach me to see the beauty in the world through my own
We come from the fire, living in the fire. Go back to the fire, turn the world around.
We come from the water, living in the water. Go back to the water, turn the world around.
We come from the mountain, living on the mountain. Go back to the mountain, turn the world around.
Whoa, so is life. Ah, so is life. Whoa, so is life. Ah, so is life.
Do you know who I am? Do I know who you are? See we one another clearly. Do we know who we are? Do you I am? Do I know I am? See we one another clearly. Do we know who we are? See we one another clearly. See we one another clearly. Do we know who we are? Whoa, so is life a batiwa. So is life. Whoa, so is life a batiwa. So is life.
Water make the river, river wash the mountain, fire make the sunlight, turn the world around.
Heart is of the river, body is the mountain, spirit is the sunlight, turn the world around.
We are of the Spirit, truly of the Spirit. Only can the Spirit turn the world around. Whoa, so is life a batiwa. Ha, so is life. Whoa, so is life a batiwa. Ha, so is life. Whoa, so is life a batiwa. Ha, so is life. Whoa, so is life a batiwa. Ha, so is life.
This service is over, and our service to the world continues. Go, my friends, go in peace. Go listening to the stories of others. Go telling your story, knowing and remembering that the stories you tell knit us together in community, in relationship, in love.